Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for a brand new Film Fanatic show. Hope everyone's doing good. It is 10:26. It is January 22nd. So yeah, hope everyone's doing good. Um, yeah, I want to welcome aboard. Got some new subscribers and welcome aboard to this crazy thing. Also, thanks again for everyone. Well, just everyone's continuous support. Making this channel grow and grow. It's been super awesome. I've been watching so many new movies. It's almost like it's almost put me in this dizzying kind of state because because I watch movies all the time and I'm a big a lot of the times like in the past when I go out and buy movies, Bull Moose and what have you, I watch those films and then I usually do shows on them. But I'm a big rewatch guy. There's a lot of collectors out there sometimes that like buy movies and it's kind of just I don't know, maybe more from a just a collector's kind of standpoint or viewpoint where people want to just own physical media and just have it, and then they'll maybe watch the movie once or twice and put it away or what have you. And obviously, when you acquire a lot of movies, Blu-rays, 4Ks, and now it's like, which I think is, I don't get it. I think it's really like ridiculous and silly. But VHS, that's kind of become a big thing now. Um, but there are people out there, collectors and YouTube people that do movie shows, but they tend to like buy a bunch of movies and then talk about their purchases, but they haven't seen them, and then they talk about certain movies that they've only seen once, and then they just kind of put them away. They don't actually watch the movies, and for me, it's a tactile experience. Like if I'm into a movie, I will treat it like a CD from a band that I really love, or an album that I really love, or in a lot of cases, a book that I really love. I'll constantly revisit it, check it out, get something new from it. So typically that's what I do. Like I'll buy a bunch of movies and sit on them for a while, and then I'll rewatch them, and then I have quite a few movies at this point, and then I'll rewatch other movies that I've seen, and then usually on average, like as far as seeing brand new films for me, whether they're older films or newer films, but just brand new films, that is usually like every couple of weeks or so. And obviously I've been going to the movies a lot, which has been really awesome. So in that case, obviously seeing new movies, but generally I don't see, like lately I've been literally watching a new movie almost for the past 2 weeks. I've been seeing a new movie every night, and I've never really done that before. Like as far as watching brand new films, for me, like, and most of these films that I'm reviewing and talking about are all from my favorite genre, the exploitation world, movies from the 70s and 80s. Just my jam. So it's been pretty awesome. It's been super fun, and I've been plugging this channel as much as I can, and I actually recommended it to a couple of people. A few people have asked about this channel where I've been getting these movies, and the Film Crypt. Definitely check that out. The Film Crypt. It's a YouTube channel, and pretty much my new obsession. Um, I got into checking out this channel. I came across it totally randomly, and I had broken my TV had busted, so I was out without a TV, and I got my TV back. I haven't set it up yet. I'm going to be setting it up really soon. But I've been just loving this channel so much, and I've been just watching all these new movies, and they're really good quality, really great transfers, full the full movie, no commercials, no ads. They're not edited or anything, and it's just been awesome. So today's show is on yet again another movie from this channel, from the Film Crypt, and that is Forbidden World. This is a movie I had never seen before. It's from 1982. Again, this was another movie that I have been just blown away by. This movie is just absolutely spectacular. Sci-fi, science fiction horror at its best. It's also this movie is probably like I've looked it up a little bit online because I had never heard of this movie before and it was my first time seeing it. A good majority of these movies I've been talking about and doing shows on, that's the case. There's been a few movies I've seen before and some that few movies that I actually own already, and then other films that I remember seeing as a kid back in the day. But about 90, 85, 90, 85, 90% of these films are all new for me. So it's been awesome, and including this one, Forbidden World. Again, this came out in 1982. You know, the prime time for super low budget exploitation movies. This is again. I watched this. I watched this film about 2 or 3 nights ago. Totally floored by it, and I've been looking up some things about this movie, Forbidden World, and it's kind of like some of the reviews and some of the you know the talking points around the film that I've seen is that people have referred to this movie as like probably the biggest alien ripoff that there ever was. Of course, Ridley Scott's masterpiece from '79, and I have to say, it's so true. It's unbelievable. Um, they even have like the alien creature in this film is like this super shitty bastardized version of the xenomorph. Like it's hilarious. You know, it's like I don't know, like if Ed Wood or something tried to make an alien film. You know, it's like really schlocky and terrible. But again, I stand true to this cliche saying, and I think it's totally accurate in so many cases, and especially in this case that it's so bad it's good. I absolutely love this movie. It's like this movie. Initially, I'd say the biggest ripoff or the biggest influence, but they definitely take it to the extreme of where they try to replicate the the iconic ship in Alien from Ridley Scott, the Nostromo. You know, a lot of those shots of like the corridors and the lighting and the technology, all of that stuff is in this movie. So like think of Alien but with you know at the time when Alien came out, it was a pretty big budget film. I don't know the exact amount of what it cost, but I know it was definitely a big production, and a lot of money was put into that movie. And of course, Ridley Scott did an amazing you know job with that. One of the most iconic horror films, science fiction movies ever made. One of the most influential, and it just looks so great. And the thing that's so cool about that movie is, it's essentially truckers in space. And Ridley Scott's always said that the movie that inspired him the most for Alien was the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which came out quite a few years before. The whole thing of a small cast of characters, trapped in this kind of old dark house kind of scenario. And it's essentially truckers in space. He always like has referred to that in lots of interviews. But it's compared to a lot of horror films, even to by today's standards, it is there's not a lot of dialogue, and a lot of the characters you're given just enough information to really enjoy them and care about them, and we're kind of just thrust into this world. And this movie has that notoriously long sequence in the beginning of where we're just seeing kind of the Nostromo, and we're getting our bearings. There's virtually no dialogue, but it's so beautiful and so mesmerizing, and just such a wonderful kind of introduction to the film. And there's all those great shots of the ship, the Nostromo, of the technology, the long corridors, and Forbidden World copies that like literally to a T. But for with Forbidden World, the budget that they had was probably fucking a few $1,000s or something. I mean, it's like if you take that high concept, and I feel like Alien was definitely a high concept movie. I mean, it was I think it still continues to be ahead of its time, but especially then it was ahead of its time. It was doing something really unique and different, and then his collaboration with the amazing artist H.R. Giger. The creature design. I mean, there's so many things that movie it just set the bar so high, and it had a big production value. This is like kind of dog shit in comparison, but again, it's awesome. And I have to say, the exploitation movies of the 70s and 80s, like that's what, first and foremost, that was, when you look at the term or think of the term exploitation, they're exploiting, a certain market, obviously, and they're also trying to, the directors in that world, the exploitation world, they're trying to like capitalize on something that was, a big phenomenon maybe in the box office, a really big popular horror film or science fiction film or what have you, or big action film. So they're trying to capitalize on that success, but they don't have anywhere near the same budget. They don't. The directors are technically not as talented or as sound, as competent as those directors most of the time. The grade of acting is usually not the greatest, and also the script writing is kind of sometimes in the shitter. But what ends up happening, and this is a primetime example, as much as this movie rips off Alien, I feel like this movie is totally its own thing. Because it goes into, it's guerrilla. I feel like exploitation movies, and this movie is like kind of the epitome of it. You know, exploitation movies it's also like guerrilla filmmaking. I've always described it as like, it's like putting on a really great, raw, nasty punk rock record. It's just coming at you. It doesn't, the artists, they don't have the luxury of like doing numerous takes because there's no money involved. They just have to, they're just fucking going for it. And you can see the passion, even though it can be, the train can go off the tracks. It's just got this grit to it, this dirtiness to it, this rawness to it, and this really fun aspect. And the thing that I always see, and I've said it many times, but I can't reiterate it enough, is that too often, like the Hollywood director system or the mentality is that things are taken. They want to make things so serious, and things are supposed to be taken at such a literal way. Whereas I feel like with exploitation directors, they're filled with passion. They're trying as hard as they can. They don't have barely have any money. They're just scraping by. They're trying to carve out something for themselves, but they are passionate, and they kind of don't take themselves that seriously, and you can kind of see that. Not like, even though I love them, you look. I always think of directors like Herschel Gordon Lewis or what have you, like compared to like a Steven Spielberg. Like he's clearly having fun and he's not like taking what he's doing so seriously, even though in a lot of regards he is. So there's that's always, for me, has always been a real attraction to exploitation cinema. And as much as a ripoff as this movie is of Alien, because it goes into some pretty weird and deranged um, areas that Alien does not, and it's also uh, pretty darn sleazy. Um, there's a lot of boobs. There's some pretty, racy sex scenes in it. We didn't get any of that in the original Alien. So, and it's just dirty. It's kind of it's super rough around the edges, and I just loved it. I just loved it. But I think that this movie is essentially like, obviously Alien is the biggest influence or ripoff, but I also feel like this movie is a big kind of ripoff of Star Wars. So it's like this weird combination of like if you took Star Wars, A New Hope, the first one, 77, and then you took Alien and you put it in this blender, and but you didn't like keep it in the blender long enough, and maybe the milk or the cream that you put in the blender is spoiled and it's kind of rotting. To me, that's what this movie is. It was so fantastic. It's so fun. There's even one of the characters in the movie in this movie that is the same costuming and the same outfit as basically like a stormtrooper in Star Wars. Like it's so fucking obvious, and it's hilarious. But again, even though this movie is so incredibly low budget, it looks really good. Like it really feels the world, this science fiction world that this movie is set in, feels real, feels tangible, and I just love it's all it's all practical effects. I mean, yeah, Alien and Star Wars, of course, were practical effects in camera, but this is even more so because you know there is less of a budget. So yeah, and it's so fun. I love this movie, and again, it's so ridiculous, and it goes into I'd say that this movie is more deranged, in comparison to say Star Wars, obviously, and Alien. This movie goes into much more of a like a deranged kind of weirdo area or places, and it's pretty sleazy as well. And the practical effects are fucking awesome. I think the practical effects in this movie are just fantastic. Um, and as cheap as again, I don't know the actual budget, but as cheaply as it seems that this movie was made, um, it looks and feels real. It looks great. It's fantastic, and it's super fun. It's a great movie to watch, like if you're hanging out with your buddies and want to drink some beers or something. I mean, it's just really fun. It's funny because it's like, I don't know, as much as I love, obviously, Star Wars, the first three, I'm a massive fan. Empire Strikes Back. I was always more of a Star Wars person than a Star Trek kid or person, but I do love Star Trek too, but I'm more of a Star Wars guy. Not a fan of really any of the other movies outside. Well, I'm not a fan at all of the other movies outside of the first three, but mainly Empire Strikes Back. That's the greatest. And Alien, of course, is one of my all-time favorite movies, and I have that's one of those movies I've grew up watching. But I have to say, in comparison, watching Forbidden World, I almost had, and I'm not knocking those classics in any way, shape, or form, but in some ways, I almost had more of a fun experience watching Forbidden World because there were moments of where I actually laughed and was like, this is fucking absurd. This is what the fuck is going on? Because, and I think that happens, with exploitation directors where there are movies that really, really, obviously are ripping off movies. I mean, like, I think of movies like um, Jaws. Jaws is a movie that's gotten ripped off big time, in the exploitation world. I mean, you have like movies like The Car, Grizzly, Maniac. Some of my favorite. exploitation movies ever made. But they, even though it's interesting how it happens, and I kind of find it oddly or kind of fascinating. But as much as those movies ripped off Jaws, in so many ways, in some ways to a T, they go off in their own weird kind of direction, and they kind of have. I feel like those movies that I mentioned, and I think definitely Forbidden World is doing the same thing. Is as much of a as it is, ripping off these big Hollywood classic films. It does its own thing. I feel like they all have each of those movies I just mentioned all have their own personality. They all have their own identity, and it's interesting because it's not like um, because it does obviously rip off another movie, and anytime I've seen interviews with the directors of a lot of these films, interviews with the cast, that always comes up. I've always seen that where people are, yeah, it's like it's so fucking obvious. But I find that in the world of exploitation movies and these really low budget films, it kind of all of those movies to me all have their own mark, and their own kind of weird charisma about them, and they're all amazing, amazing. And I do have more fun sometimes with those movies just because they just go into weirder directions. They're just a little bit more strange. They're a little bit more sleazy, and I don't know. They kind of push the envelope sometimes a little bit more. So it's interesting. There's that classic saying, another cliche thing to say, but I think it's actually really true. You know, good composers borrow, great composers steal, and I think that's probably part of it too. Although I wouldn't say some of these directors are great directors per se, but still there's there is there is some kind of scope and talent to it. You know, like I said, Herschel Gordon Lewis, one of my favorite directors of all time. On paper he was kind of a shit director, but he had his own style, he had his own voice, and I do think in his way he left his signature, and he left um, a great body of work for what it is. I'm not gonna like probably talk about him in the light, in the same light as say of like Stanley Kubrick or newer directors like Denis Villeneuve, but in his own fucked up weird way, Herschel Gordon Lewis had it going on. So, and it's interesting because I do find sometimes when, well, I do say I see that as more of the case. And it's interesting because there's obviously that happens a lot, and there there have been situations, where say there is this big, well, it actually happens. It happens all the time, and it's not anything new. But like, say when there's a big action movie that comes out, or a big Hollywood horror film that comes out, or what have you, and it really hits hard. A movie like say Hereditary or It Follows, like just phenomenal movies that really kind of set the world on fire when it comes out. There's always the case of where in the Hollywood system itself, there'll be other films that will come out and will try to just basically rip that film off, and it will, you know, just try to mirror that film, but financially it will have like the same budget. It will be by another big studio, or it will be by another well-known director or pretty somewhat proficient director. That's happened a lot, and I find most of the time when that happens, um, it it ruins it for me, and I think most of the time that when that does happen, those movies that come out that are, you know, replicating something else within, you know, that same budget area, they suck. They're shit to me. I think one, or they're just so overrated. Like one great example for me would be like It Follows, which I think is an amazing horror film that came out probably quite a few years ago now, maybe like 7 or 8 years ago. But as far as like more modern horror films, I think it's like, you know, one of the greatest. Just awesome. I have a beautiful Blu-ray version of that film. I love that movie to death. And then then that was a big success. That movie was really unique, really different. It it did something unique in the horror genre. It's actually a really legitimately scary film. It's just an awesome movie. And then a few years ago, another movie came out called Smile, which to me is like totally a ripoff of It Follows, and it doesn't do anything different. I mean, it. I guess to some degree, it tries to tell a different story, but it's got a big budget, you know, and that movie was big. That was a popular movie, but for me, you could say that movie was exploiting It Follows, and it had the same budget. It had probably the same caliber of actors, and as far as, you know, technical proficiency to a degree. But I didn't like that movie because I felt like it didn't work. It didn't have any of its own. It didn't really have its own quality or qualities that made it, you know, its own thing. And it, you know, it just kind of replicated something that was really successful and copied a, you know, a certain formula that was really good. And I just feel like that happens a lot in you know, in the Hollywood system when that happens. Um, and more often than not, I find that those movies are, you know, it doesn't work when you rip off something. It just doesn't work, and I think it's due because of, you know, they're trying to make it in this like create this. I don't know. The film is has this more has a serious tone to it. But in the expectation world, for me, it works. You know, when I look at, for instance, you know, for what Forbidden World is to Alien, where to me, again, it's no bones about it. It's so fucking obvious. It's a total ripoff of Alien, but it's its own thing because it's so ridiculous, and it does go into much more bizarre areas, and it's a little bit more deranged. It's sleazier, but it's a total ripoff. But it works for me. I mean, what do I know? My taste is up my ass. I watch crappy movies all day, so. But for me, it works because of that, because of the lack of budget and the guerrilla filmmaking, the passion behind it, just going for it. And then when I look at It Follows, and then a movie like Smile, it's like it doesn't have any of that to me. It's just a carbon copy of a good idea, and it doesn't have any of its own legs under it. And then another example of that, which is a movie I just saw, which was very really disappointing, but another movie, modern horror film that I think is one of the greatest horror films that's come out in the last, you know, decade or so is Hereditary. Ari Aster's Hereditary. I love that movie. I think that movie's a masterpiece. And I just recently saw Shelby Oaks, which I was really disappointed with. And that, you know, that movie ripped off a lot of movies, but it really, I felt ripped off. Tried to really copy and paste a lot of the things from Hereditary, and the movie is a pile of crap, and it's like, what? And again, it's just another example of how it doesn't work for me. I mean, I'm sure there are exceptions to that, but when we bounce back into the exploitation world, I always find 10 out of 10 or 9 out of 10 times it totally fucking works. It totally connects, and it's fun as fucking hell. So it's great. Um, and I find that, I don't know, maybe I have too much time on my hands and I don't have a life, but I just find that kind of world, like thinking about those things, like how, like because that happens a lot when I watch a lot of these movies where I'm like, there's times where I'm like so baffled, and I'm like, wow, how the fuck did this get made? Like, how did the filmmakers or say the guy or girl who wrote the screenplay convince people to like put their own money into this pile of shit, and yet it fucking works? Like, I just find that fascinating. Um, Super fascinating. And Forbidden World is like, again, it's the prime time example. It's a prime time example of that in every way. It really is. The basic premise of Forbidden Forbidden World from 1982 is it's a group of researchers create an experimental life form known as Subject 20 on planet Xarbia. They hope to prevent a galactic food crisis, but instead they end up with a threat to society, and that is essentially the xenomorph knockoff. It takes place on this ship. It's all like close quarters, but it's awesome, and I can't recommend this movie enough. I totally would and want to get this on Blu-ray. I love, as much, because I feel like, I don't know, it's so weird because I feel like the world around us is kind of burning down to the ground. But there are some things that are really awesome, and I think this is one of them. Being a movie fan, a film fanatic in this case, I guess, finding all of this, obscure shit, and then seeing that these movies are getting a Blu-ray 4K release, and some of these, directors and actors that probably didn't make a whole lot of money, if that, when these movies came out, but they're getting their due. Like, and I think that's wonderful because I think these movies, they're fun, they're ridiculous, they're silly, but they're just fucking awesome. And I just think I've seen that happen with all these boutique labels that have been putting out movies, you know, for quite a long time now. That a lot of these movies have grown and have found an audience, and probably the movie for me that's I've seen that, and I was kind of following this like weird trajectory. But my favorite horror exploitation movie of all time, Tourist Trap with Chuck Connors, that's my all time favorite movie in this world. I remember, like, I don't know, 10 years ago or whatever, looking it up online, and people like regarding it as just like you know, a dirty ass of a movie, like just a pile of shit. And I remember seeing, there were like these online polls or whatever where people would, the worst, you'd have every now and then you'd have like a reviewer or somebody, you know, make a list of like the top 10, say, worst movies ever made. And no joke, but I remember seeing Tourist Trap and numerous times in that kind of setting or in that light being voted as like the worst movie ever made, like literally. And I grew up watching that movie. I always loved that movie, and I know it's just fucking awful, but it's fucking amazing. And I think for a horror film, there's some moments in that film that I think are truly some of the most disturbing things. That movie fucked me up as a kid, and maybe it explains as to why I'm now an adult and I'm fucked up. But oh god, what an awesome movie! And to see over the period of like 10, 8 years, 7 years go by, to see now where Tourist Trap has this newfound audience, and now if I watch a YouTube guy, and it will happen. It's happened many times. I'll see, the, around Halloween time, there'll be, YouTube guys or girls or just film reviewers doing their, their top 10 scary films, top 10 horror films to watch around Halloween, or they'll do a or their a show on the greatest, their top 20 or whatever horror films of all time. And now I've seen this crazy trajectory where I've seen it multiple times of where a film like Tourist Trap is now at the top tier list of a lot of these YouTube guys. And these are guys and girls that, traditionally, most of the time review and talk about, contemporary modern horror films. And it's amazing. And to see that film that was regarded as like a piece of stale old or day old dog shit and a porta potty is like regarded now as like like a cult classic, you know. And to see that movie has gotten, I mean, there's all these beautiful editions of that movie on Blu-ray. I picked up this beautiful Blu-ray edition of that a few years back, and I was just like totally freaking blown away by it. And it's out on 4K. I mean, it's crazy. And I think Forbidden World. This is a movie I'd never seen before, and I just think that this movie is just absolutely phenomenal for what it is, for it being the kind of the piece of shit that it is. There's this one scene that is so hilarious because again, the creature in this movie, Subject 20 or Subject 20 is the name for this mutant monster alien creature. There's and again, it's such a ripoff of the Xenomorph. But it's so hilarious. It's so hilarious. There's even like this scene of where, kind of where you see this thing kind of morphing, and where it looks like it's going to like lay eggs. Oh my god, it's hilarious. It's so hilarious. But the practical effects are super awesome in this movie. Like for what they are, I rather see these kinds of effects in a movie any day, anytime over the majority of CGI effects that I see. Like I am getting so sick of fucking CGI effects. Like it just happened with me. Like and I just uploaded my review of it, Frankenstein: A True Story from 1973, which was a TV movie, and I saw Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein, and I preferred this one that I saw the other night, the television movie, more. And there's zero CGI. It's all everything you're seeing is in camera. It's handmade, and and I'm not saying that movie's not good, but I don't know. I don't know what it is, and I feel like watching Forbidden World. It's all about that, and it's super campy. It's super fun. Um, you can't I can't get enough of it. It's just great. It was directed by Forbidden World was directed by Alan Holtzman, who again I have no idea who he is. Um, I don't know what films he's done. Um, Alan Alan Holtzman, pretty wild bio. His 40-year career, Alan has proven himself as a skilled filmmaker and chameleon. His work as the director editor of Steven Spielberg's Survivors of the Holocaust won Alan 2 Emmy Awards and a Peabody. That's crazy. His feature documentaries, Old Man River and Sounds of Memphis, earned a combined 8 Best Documentary Film Awards. Jesus. This is the same director who made fucking Forbidden World. This is crazy. Alan began editing under Roger Corman, one of my favorites, the legend. A lot of these movies I've been seeing as of late have been Roger Corman productions. So that explains it all. and which famously launched the careers of who's who and Hollywood greats. Allen has directed 5 narrative feature films, including the hilarious action-packed Mutant, aka Forbidden World, recently released by Shout Factory, and the fake documentary Grunt, the wrestling movie. His psychological thriller Intimate Stranger with Deborah Harry still stands as Showtime's highest-rated film. Um, More recently, Allen has challenged himself in a wide variety of projects, um, including an interactive multi-screen video for the 20th Century Fox, the Titanic attraction. Um, he's done whimsical documentaries accompanying DVD releases for Walt Disney films. What? Cinderella, The Lion King, Aladdin, Lady and the Tramp, and Pocahontas. A biodoc about television humor pioneer Sheldon Leonard, producer of The Dick Van Dyke Show, The Andy Griffith Show, and I Spy. Crazy. Crazy. It's fucking crazy. You just never know. So, yeah, Forbidden World. This movie is the shit. It is amazing. Uh, I'm a massive science fiction fan. Obviously, horror is my favorite. But I love when they're both put together in a glorious way. And this movie just totally rocks. Look out for it if you haven't seen it. And definitely check out the Film Crypt YouTube channel. It's awesome. Like the page, subscribe to it, comment on the videos. It's awesome. I love the work that, I don't know who, if it's a guy or girl, I don't know who it is. But whoever this person is who's running this channel is cat's meow. So thanks again, and we will see you next time. Peace.